I never thought I'd be the guy in one of these stories. You know, the one who gets cheated on, blindsided by a wife who's been playing him the whole time. It's one of those things that happens to other people, not to me. Not to someone who's worked hard his whole life, kept his head down, did the right thing. I thought I knew my wife, Anna. Hell, I thought I knew myself, too. But looking back, I wasn't the man I used to be. Not anymore. I'm 64, retired for a couple of years now, living in a house that's paid off, with a little extra time to enjoy what I worked so damn hard for. We were supposed to be enjoying the golden years. I had my health, my kids were doing all right, and Anna and I, well, we were supposed to be solid. 15 years of marriage. We weren't perfect, but we got along. We had a routine, a good one. Weekends up at the cabin, occasional fishing trips, Sunday dinners with the kids. Nothing glamorous, just us. Then, one day, the rug got yanked out from under me. At first, I didn't even notice it. But somewhere, in the background of all that calm, something shifted. At first, it was small, just little things I could explain away. After all, what do you do when everything that felt right feels wrong? Anna started staying late at work more and more. She was a paralegal at a law firm. Nothing flashy. She never got caught up in office politics. Always came home at a decent hour. But then suddenly she was working late. Every day. The excuse? There's a new case, Jim. I've got a lot on my plate. The first couple of times, I believed it. I'm no fool. But who doesn't trust their wife when she's always been so reliable? But then I started noticing something. She'd leave the office late, but she wouldn't come home right away. One evening, I'd had enough of the excuses. I called her. Hey, what's going on? You getting home tonight? She told me she was stuck at the office and couldn't leave until the files were done. I didn't buy it. The excuse was too rehearsed. But again, I didn't press it. I had to let it go. We had a history, I told myself. She wouldn't just change on a whim. Then the changes kept coming. Her wardrobe, for one. Anna had always been the practical type. A few jeans, a couple of shirts, nothing over the top. But over the past few months, she started dressing differently. Fitting clothes, higher heels, makeup that never used to make an appearance. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, a midlife crisis or something, but I wasn't a damn fool. I'd seen enough in my time to know when a change wasn't just a phase. She'd always been a homebody, but now she was going out more, meeting friends I didn't know. Some work friends, she'd say, but I'd never heard of them. She'd be gone for hours, telling me she was out for a girls' night. At first, I didn't ask too many questions, but then she started to get defensive. When I mentioned how I hadn't met any of these friends, she'd shoot me a sharp look and quickly change the subject. I didn't like it. Hell, I hated it, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe I was paranoid, I thought. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was just me. But then came the big one, the weekend she booked away for herself. I need some alone time, she told me. Just to relax, clear my head. Anna never went anywhere by herself. We always took trips together, even if they were just weekend getaways to the cabin. But now, out of nowhere, she's planning a solo trip. To a cabin, of all places. She says it's for self-care. I try to let it slide, but there was a sinking feeling in my gut I couldn't ignore. This wasn't just me time. This was something else. When she came back, nothing seemed to add up. There was an unease between us I couldn't shake. I didn't say it, but I knew something was wrong. I tried to ignore it, tell myself it was just her trying to reconnect with herself. But when she came home that night and acted like everything was fine, it felt like she was trying to sell me a lie. That's when I noticed something else. Her phone. She was always protective of it. Always had it close by, especially when we were out or at home. But one evening, after dinner, she left it on the kitchen counter. Something about it felt wrong. I knew I shouldn't snoop, but hell, it was like a magnet drawing me in. I didn't want to, well, I did, but I didn't want to know. But my gut was screaming at me. So I picked it up, and that's when I saw it. A string of messages from a guy named Chris. They weren't just work-related or casual chit-chat. No, these were personal. Too personal. And they weren't just, hey, how's it going? Either. These were plans, dates, locations. They'd met up. They'd been meeting up. And the worst part? She hadn't even tried to hide it. At least not well enough. I felt a rush of anger and disbelief wash over me. The blood drained from my face, but something else was happening too. A sharp clarity. All those little changes, All those little warning signs suddenly clicked into place. She wasn't just working late. She wasn't just dressing up more. She wasn't just taking alone time. She'd been seeing him. She'd been seeing Chris. I could feel the knot tightening in my stomach. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I couldn't just sit there and let this play out like some passive bystander. The life I thought I knew was falling apart in front of me, and I wasn't going to sit back and take it. The next day, I confronted her. I didn't hold back. I didn't give her the chance to explain herself or try to cover it up. I showed her the messages, every word of them. She went pale, her eyes darting around like she was looking for a way out. For a second, she tried to deny it, but I wasn't having it. "Don't lie to me," I said. "I know what's going on." She tried to talk her way out of it, tried to beg me for forgiveness, to explain that it was just a mistake or that she didn't know how it happened. I didn't care about her excuses. I wasn't going to let this slide. What I didn't expect, though, was how cold I'd become in that moment. My heart didn't race. I didn't feel torn or confused. I just felt done. I didn't want to cry. I didn't want to feel sorry for her. I wanted to hurt her the way she'd hurt me. The next day, I didn't waste time thinking it over. I had the evidence now, clear as day, right there in front of me. My gut, my suspicions, they were all true. She'd been lying, and not just about something small. She had betrayed me, and I wasn't going to stand around pretending I didn't know. I had planned to confront Anna calmly, give her the chance to explain. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. This wasn't something that could be explained away. Not anymore. I waited until the evening. I needed her to be home, to face her head on. The kids were out with friends, and Anna had come home from work a little earlier than usual. She was still wearing that damn red dress she'd worn last weekend when she came back from her self-care trip. I could feel the anger stirring in me again, even though I was doing my best to stay composed. When she walked through the door, I didn't even greet her. I just walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up her phone, putting it in front of her. Her face went pale instantly. I didn't have to say a word. Her eyes were already darting around, looking for a way out, as if she knew I had already found the truth. I couldn't stand the sight of her pretending like everything was fine. "Don't bother with the excuses," I said, my voice steady but cold. "I've already seen everything." Anna stood there, frozen, staring at the phone. I watched as she tried to process what I was saying, the shock slowly fading into something that looked like guilt. For a split second, she seemed like she might say something, but then she just shook her head, as if to clear the thoughts racing through her mind. "Jim, listen, please," she started, her voice shaky, almost pleading. "It's not what you think." Not what I think." I cut her off. "I know exactly what it is. I saw the messages, Anna. I saw the plans. You've been meeting him. You've been seeing Chris. For how long? A month? Longer?" Her face flushed, and for a moment, she looked like she might crumble. But she didn't. Instead, she took a deep breath and straightened her back, trying to regain some composure. "It's not like that, Jim," she said, her voice softer now, but with a defensive edge. "I never meant for it to happen. I don't know. I was feeling lost. And Chris, he was there for me. He understood me. You were always busy, and I just felt like I needed something more." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was still trying to justify it, still trying to put the blame on me. The nerve of her. "So, let me get this straight," I said, my voice rising a little. "Because I was working too much, that gives you the right to go and sleep with another man? That gives you the right to throw away everything we've built?" She flinched at the accusation, but she didn't back down. "No, Jim, I didn't mean to hurt you. I never wanted to hurt you." She took a step toward me, as if trying to close the distance between us. I needed to feel wanted again. I needed to feel seen. And Chris, he was there when I needed him. It just happened. I felt a wave of disgust rush over me. Her words weren't remorseful. They were justifications. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry she got caught. It hit me like a slap across the face. The woman I had been married to for 15 years, the woman I thought I knew, was standing here, making excuses for her actions. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice low now, controlled. "I gave you my trust, my time, my loyalty. And this is how you repay me." She looked away, tears welling up in her eyes, but I wasn't interested in her tears anymore. I don't want to hear it, Anna. You've made your choices. You've crossed a line I can't come back from. I let those words hang in the air between us. I could see the way she flinched at them, the way the reality of what she had done finally started to settle in. But it wasn't enough. No, she wasn't going to walk away from this unscathed. Not after everything. I can't just forgive this. I continued, taking a step closer to her, letting the anger build again. This isn't something you can fix with a few tears and a sorry. You don't get to just wipe the slate clean because you feel bad about it now. You've ruined everything. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I cut her off. Save it. We're done. I'm done. For a moment, Anna just stood there, her shoulders slumped in defeat. She looked broken, but I wasn't ready to show her any sympathy. Not yet. Not after what she'd done. Jim, please, she said, her voice shaking now. I never meant to destroy us. I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything, please. Just give me a chance to fix this. I let out a bitter laugh. You think you can fix this? After everything? After betraying me with him? I shook my head, disgusted. You can't fix it, Anna. The trust is gone. It's all gone. She took a step toward me, reaching out, her fingers trembling as they hovered near my arm. Jim, I love you, she whispered, almost desperately now. I know I messed up, but I can't lose you. Please, let's go to therapy. Let's work through this together. I pulled back sharply, stepping away from her. No, no more therapy, no more excuses. It's too late for that. You made your choice. Anna collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands, sobbing now. I could hear her gasping for breath between sobs, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. And that's when I knew what I had to do. I stood there watching her for a moment, the anger still simmering in my chest. I wasn't just going to walk away and let her think she'd gotten off easy. I couldn't. I couldn't let her go on as if nothing had happened, as if everything was still fine. This betrayal? It wasn't something you just moved past. I made my decision then right there. I was done. But I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. No, I was going to make her feel the consequences of what she'd done. Every single one. Anna had wanted something more. Well, now she was going to get it. I wasn't just walking out on her. I was going to tear down everything she had built, everything she thought was safe. Her career, her reputation, her little world. I was going to make sure it came crashing down around her. It wasn't out of spite. It wasn't about revenge in the way people usually think. It was about making her understand the gravity of what she had done. And she would. She'd understand it when I was done. But first, I had to give her a moment to think, to sit in the mess she'd created. So, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her there in the silence. I spent the rest of that night alone in the garage, pacing back and forth, trying to get my head straight. I wasn't sure if I was angry, sad, or just numb, but I couldn't stop thinking about how everything had unraveled, how everything I thought I knew about my wife and my life had been nothing but a lie. I had given her everything, my loyalty, my trust, my time. And for what? To be betrayed like this? I knew I had to do something. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to just let her walk away without facing the consequences of her actions. It wasn't just about her and me anymore. It was about the respect I'd lost, the dignity I'd sacrificed for all those years while she was out there with Chris. I wasn't going to let her make a fool out of me. The plan started taking shape in my mind. It wasn't going to be a quick, petty revenge. No, this was going to be a surgical strike. I would hit her where it would hurt the most, not just emotionally, because frankly, that wouldn't be enough for me, but financially, socially, professionally. I would make sure her betrayal cost her everything she had worked so hard to build. Because if she thought she could get away with this without repercussions, she was dead wrong. I wasn't going to tell her what I had planned. Not yet. I wanted her to stew in the idea that I might just walk away and leave her to her own devices. I wanted her to think that everything would go back to normal, that she'd cry a few tears and beg me to forgive her, and I'd eventually cave. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of thinking I was weak. No, I would make her regret what she'd done. But first, I had to hit her where it mattered. It wasn't enough to just destroy her reputation. No, that wasn't going to do it. I had to make sure she couldn't go on as if nothing happened. I had to take everything from her. I started with her career. Anna was proud of the work she had done at the law firm. She'd always bragged about her position, about how well she was doing, how important her work was. But now I was going to make sure that career crumbled. I knew enough about the firm, who the partners were, who the clients were. Anna had never been discreet about her work. She liked to talk about it at home. She'd tell me everything, probably because I'd never shown much interest in it. I'd always just listened, but now I was listening with a purpose. I didn't take immediate action. No, I had to plan this carefully. I had to wait for the right moment. But as I sat in the garage, letting the anger simmer down, I realized that I could make this happen in a way that would leave her with nothing. Her colleagues, her bosses, they would hear about her betrayal, and they would know exactly what kind of person they were working with. I'd make sure her reputation in that office was shredded beyond repair. The next step was her friends, the ones she'd been spending so much time with lately. I hadn't met any of them, and that had always bothered me. But now, I didn't need to meet them. I knew enough. I had enough connections of my own. I had some old contacts in her circle, people who could help me spread the word, people who could make sure her social circles were poisoned by the truth. I knew who to talk to, how to get the information out there without looking like I was the one causing the storm. I wasn't going to let her get away with this, pretending that she was the same woman she had been when I married her. She had made a decision, and now I was going to make sure she faced the consequences of that decision. I thought about the kids, about what this was going to do to them. I didn't want to drag them into it, but I knew they'd eventually find out. The thing was, I wasn't about to protect Anna's image. She had destroyed her own. If the kids wanted to know the truth, I'd tell them. But I wouldn't poison their minds with details they didn't need to know. Still, I made a mental note. I would protect them from the worst of it, but if they asked, they'd get the full story. The next day, I started putting the plan into motion. The first thing I did was contact a friend of mine, someone who had worked in the legal field for years. I didn't want to do this alone, and I needed to make sure my next steps were legal. He knew the right people at her law firm, and with a few calls, I had the ear of someone who could dig up dirt. My goal wasn't just to ruin her reputation. It was to make sure she couldn't work in that field anymore. And I'd worked hard to get where she was, and I was going to take it all away. I was going to make sure her career was over before she even realized what was happening. I played it cool, told my contact to gather some dirt on Anna. Nothing too obvious, just enough to plant the seeds of doubt. I wasn't asking for anything illegal. Just a few whispers, a couple of questions that would make the people at the law firm start wondering. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. Once the rumors started, they'd take on a life of their own. Then came the part about her friends. I had a few acquaintances who knew Anna's inner circle. I called them up and casually mentioned that I'd found out about Chris and asked if they knew anything about it. I was careful not to directly accuse Anna, but I made sure they knew the whole story. I was planting seeds, letting them hear about her infidelity and watch it spread. By the time Anna got wind of what I was doing, it was already too late. Her colleagues started treating her differently. Her friends started distancing themselves. I didn't have to do anything drastic. I just had to nudge the truth out into the open and watch as it spread like wildfire. And then it was time for the final blow, the one that would hit her hardest. I knew she would never see it coming. It was time to reveal it all. I knew where Anna's biggest vulnerability was. It wasn't her career. It wasn't her reputation. It was her connection to her family. Her pride in her image, her sense of superiority. That was where I could hit her hardest. I had her parents, her siblings, all of them firmly on her side. But I knew how to break that. I would make sure they knew exactly what she had done. I would make sure they knew she wasn't the person they thought she was. And I wasn't going to stop there. I wasn't just going to ruin her professionally or socially. No, I wanted to break her. I wanted her to understand that what she had done had consequences that went beyond a simple apology. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had thrown away. The revenge wouldn't be immediate, but I was patient. This was going to take time, and I was ready. What I didn't expect, though, was how she would react. I knew she'd try to fix things to fight back, but I didn't know how far she'd go. It wasn't going to be easy, and I wasn't going to be nice. But this was my story now, and Anna had lost the right to play the victim. The only thing left to do was watch. Watch her squirm as her life, her career, and everything she had worked for slipped out of her grasp. The days that followed Anna's betrayal were not filled with anger or outbursts. No, I had learned long ago that anger wasn't going to fix anything. It wasn't going to solve the problem or punish her the way she needed to be punished. What would hit her hardest, I knew, was a cold, calculated response, a response that showed her just how insignificant she had become in my life. I wasn't going to throw a tantrum, make a scene, or yell at her. Instead, I was going to make her regret her choices in the most silent, efficient way possible. The plan I had put in motion was working. I could see the cracks forming in her life, slowly, insidiously, like the way you notice the first tiny flaw in a stone only to realize, weeks later, that it's shattered beyond repair. Her confidence at work had begun to unravel. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, that I was projecting too much of my anger onto her. But then I saw it. She was no longer walking into the office with the same assured smile, the same charm that had made her the star of her firm. Now, she seemed distracted, lost in thought, hesitant. Conversations with her colleagues had become strained. When she returned home at night, I could see the tension in her face. The world she had once built for herself was starting to fall apart. It was a thing of beauty, really watching it all crumble. Anna had always been the one in control, the one who made the decisions, the one who kept things together while I stayed in the background, letting her take the lead. I was the dependable one, the one she could count on. But now, she was the one playing catch-up. As she slowly began to realize that the life she had worked so hard to create was beginning to slip away, she reached out to me. I didn't expect her to. In my mind, I had already moved on. I had accepted what had happened and was prepared to deal with it. But Anna wasn't ready to let go. She sent me a message one morning. "I'm sorry, Jim. I can't fix what I've done, but I can try. Please let me fix this." I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and disgust. The words she was sending me meant nothing. She didn't get it. She still thought she could apologize her way out of this, that she could somehow make me forget everything, her lies, her selfishness, her betrayal. I didn't respond. Not yet. It wasn't time. She had no idea what was coming. A week later, she started showing up more frequently. Anna was trying to soften me up, testing the waters to see if I could be won back. She would send me messages through the kids, telling me how much she missed me, how much she needed me. Then she'd call. Sometimes I'd let the phone ring. Other times I'd pick up and listen to her plead. Her voice trembled with emotion, and I almost felt sorry for her. But I had learned long ago that guilt was a tool, and I wasn't about to let her use it on me. One night, after dinner, she sat me down in the living room. Her eyes were red, and her shoulders slumped. She was trying to appear vulnerable, to make me feel sorry for her, but I wasn't fooled. "Jim," she began, her voice soft and hesitant, "I know I've hurt you, and I know I can't undo it. But I love you. I've always loved you. Please, I need you. I don't want to lose you. We can go to therapy. We can fix this. Just give me another chance." I watched her for a moment, not saying anything. She sat there, waiting, her eyes wide, desperate for a sign that I would come back to her. But I wasn't going to be swayed. "Not this time. You want me to just forget?" "To forgive you because you're saying the right words now," I said, keeping my voice even. "You don't get to decide that, Anna. You made your choice. You chose him. And now you have to live with it." Her face reddened, her jaw clenched, and I saw the fury in her eyes for the first time in weeks. She wasn't the calm, collected woman I had once known. She was broken. Her voice shook with a mix of frustration and regret. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Jim. I didn't. This wasn't supposed to happen. I just needed something more." "More?" I repeated. "More than what?" "More than a husband who worked his ass off to make sure you had everything? More than a man who was always there for you, who supported you. You think that wasn't enough?" She couldn't answer. She just stared at me, her eyes starting to fill with tears. "You don't get to ask me for anything anymore," I continued, my voice cold. "You don't get to make demands or play the victim. You made your bed, Anna. Now lie in it." The silence between us stretched on. I could see her trembling, her lips quivering as if she were about to break down. But I wasn't going to be her savior. I was done saving her. And that was when things started to get interesting. Anna wasn't stupid. She knew that something was happening at the firm. Her colleagues were treating her differently. Cold shoulders, whispered conversations when she entered the room. At first, she tried to ignore it. But after a few weeks, it became impossible to avoid. She began to get the sense that the whispers weren't just about her work, they were about her personal life. And when she received a formal email from the HR department, she knew it was only a matter of time before her affair with Chris became public knowledge. It was a quiet email, innocuous enough at first glance, but it carried the weight of an impending investigation. We are reviewing your recent performance, including certain concerns regarding your conduct. Please prepare for a meeting with HR. She came home that evening pale and shaken, her hands trembling as she showed me the email. She didn't need to say anything. I could see it on her face, the realization that her world was collapsing. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered, almost pleading. "This is all just gossip. It's all lies, Jim. I swear." I didn't say anything at first. I let the silence hang between us, heavy with meaning. Then slowly I stood up. "Anna," I said softly, but with a finality that seemed to shake her to her core. "This is what happens when you think you can get away with everything. You've been living in a fantasy, pretending that you could have it all, without paying for it. But now you'll pay." Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just stared at me, her face crumpling. There was no more fighting. She had lost. But the best part hadn't even happened yet. A few days later, after Anna had been stewing in her own mess, I decided to confront her head-on. She had no idea what I was about to do. She still thought she could salvage something, anything, from this disaster. But she was about to learn the hard way that her charm wouldn't save her anymore. One evening, while she was getting ready for work, I heard a knock at the door. I went to answer it. Standing on the other side was Chris. For a moment, I didn't know what to think. I hadn't expected him to show up, not like this. He stood there, looking uncomfortable, his posture stiff. His eyes darted to Anna, then back to me. "You need to leave," I said, my voice low but firm. "Anna and I are done. You're not welcome here anymore." Chris glanced at Anna before nodding, his face unreadable. Without a word, he turned and walked away. Anna didn't move for a long time. She stood frozen, staring at the door, her hand still on the doorknob. Then, without a sound, she turned to face me. Her face was pale, and I could see the confusion, the anger, and something else in her eyes. "You don't have to do this, Jim," she whispered. "We can fix it. I'll make it right. I swear." But I wasn't listening anymore. I had already made up my mind. Anna had no power over me. She wasn't going to manipulate me into forgiving her, not this time. It was done. Anna's world was falling apart, and there was no saving her. No amount of pleading, no tearful apologies, no promises to change could undo what had been done. She had made her choice, and now she was paying the price. And as I watched her break down, part of me felt nothing. There was no satisfaction in seeing her crumble. There was no joy in watching her fail. All I felt was the quiet certainty that this was the only way things could end. The damage had been done. The night Anna came home, after the confrontation with Chris, marked a significant turning point. I knew that it would never be the same again between us. She had been caught, and the weight of that truth was finally settling in. But it wasn't us she was concerned about. She wasn't sorry for what she had done to our marriage or to me. It was the consequences that had her scrambling. The life she'd built, the reputation she'd carefully constructed, was starting to crumble. It wasn't about redemption anymore, it was about survival. When she entered the house that night, I noticed immediately that she was different. Her body language gave her away long before she spoke. The slight slouch in her shoulders, the tiredness in her eyes. She was no longer the confident, self-assured woman who had once commanded attention with a mere glance. She had been brought low. "Jim," she began softly, her voice unsteady. "I've been thinking a lot, and I know what I did was unforgivable. But I need you to understand, I never meant to hurt you. You're everything to me, and I can't lose you. I know I've made mistakes, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make it right." I stood there listening, my expression unchanged. She had gone through the motions of an apology, but I could tell it was rehearsed. The desperation in her voice wasn't for us. It was about damage control. She wasn't asking for my forgiveness. She was trying to salvage her dignity, trying to hold on to the life that was slipping through her fingers. "You've already lost me," I said calmly, my tone firm. There was no anger in my voice, just the quiet certainty that this was the end. You betrayed me, Anna, and now you're going to have to live with the consequences. There's no going back from this. Her face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt a flicker of pity. But that passed quickly. Her tears, which started to roll down her face, weren't genuine. I could see the mechanics of her emotions. The practiced act, the reflexive response to guilt. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for herself. I don't think you understand how bad this is for me, she pleaded, her voice rising with a hint of frustration. This isn't just about us. My whole life is falling apart. My job, my friends, people are talking. I can't just lose everything like this. You can't leave me now. Not like this. I gave her a long, steady look, weighing her words. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. You brought this on yourself, I said flatly. Don't try to shift the blame onto me. I didn't make this mess. You did, and now you have to deal with it. Anna shook her head, as though she couldn't comprehend why I wasn't willing to forgive her. She wanted me to believe her words, to believe in her so-called remorse, but I knew better. I had seen her true colors for too long. I had been blinded by love, by the illusion of happiness for years, but I could see clearly now. I know I made a mistake, she said, her voice quieter now, but the underlying impatience was still there. But I've changed. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make things right. We can fix this. We can be happy again. You don't get to decide that. I snapped, finally losing my composure. But even then, I kept my voice measured, controlled. I wasn't angry, not really. But I was done. You don't get to decide if we're going to fix this. I'm not some fool you can manipulate into forgiveness. What you need to do now is face the consequences. All of them. I watched as her face fell even further. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words seemed to catch in her throat. She had no more excuses, no more justifications. The game was up. In the days that followed, I could feel the tension in the house. Anna tried everything she could think of to win me back. She tried to rekindle our romantic connection, pulling out all the stops, a surprise weekend getaway, cozy dinners at home, even starting to spend more time with the kids like she suddenly gave a damn about the family. It all felt hollow, like a desperate attempt to put the pieces of her crumbling life back together. But I wasn't interested. The damage had been done. I had a plan now. No more passivity, no more waiting. I was done with the games. It was time for her to feel the full weight of what she had done. The cold, calculated revenge that had been simmering inside me finally began to take shape. And I wasn't going to let up until I had made sure she understood the price of betrayal. The first part of my plan was simple: ruin her at work. Anna had always prided herself on her career. She was the golden girl at the office, the one who had all the answers, who seemed to always be one step ahead. She was respected, admired, even envied. But now, she was a fraud, and I was going to make sure her colleagues knew it. I started small, reaching out to a few key people in her office, people I knew could be trusted to pass along information. I fed them just enough to get the wheels turning. Did you know Anna was having an affair with Chris? It's been going on for months. Funny, she didn't mention it to any of you. The whispers spread quickly. Soon, there would be no hiding the truth. Anna had always prided herself on her professional image, but now that was in tatters. Her colleagues would see her as the unfaithful wife, the woman who couldn't even keep her personal life in check. And that was just the beginning. At home, I became a ghost. I withdrew entirely, offering no support, no warmth. Every time she tried to get close, I pushed her away, both emotionally and physically. I didn't need to scream or shout. I knew silence was the most punishing weapon I had. Every time she reached for me, I made sure she felt the cold distance between us. The second part of my plan was to make sure she had no one left to turn to. I began telling our friends, our family, anyone who would listen about the affair. I wasn't seeking sympathy or understanding. I wasn't interested in playing the victim. I just wanted Anna to know that she couldn't hide. She couldn't keep up the illusion of the perfect life she had crafted. My brother was the first one I spoke to. I explained everything: Chris, the affair, the lies. He was shocked, but he listened. Then I reached out to some of our mutual friends, letting them know the truth. I didn't care what they thought of me. I wasn't trying to turn them against Anna. I was just making sure they knew who she really was. Anna caught wind of what I was doing and tried to stop me. She called my mother, begging her to intervene. Please talk to Jim. Please tell him that I'm sorry. I love him. I made a terrible mistake. I want to fix this. My mother's response was simple and final. I can't change his mind, Anna. He's made his decision. You'll have to live with it. The final phase of my revenge came when I started targeting our finances. This was the one area where Anna had always felt secure, where she thought she had the upper hand. I had been the one to manage our investments, our savings. But now I made sure to tighten the reins. I transferred some of the assets into my name, making sure she had no access to certain funds. I spoke to our financial advisor, made sure that the joint accounts were in flux. The changes were subtle at first, but over time, they began to add up. She was left scrambling, unable to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to. The more I pulled back financially, the more she felt the weight of the consequences of her betrayal. The day we sat down for the divorce proceedings, I knew she had finally realized the gravity of her actions. She sat across from me, her face a mask of anger and regret. She had no more excuses, no more apologies. You're going to regret this, she said, her voice trembling. You don't understand what you're doing. You'll see. I looked at her with cold detachment. No, Anna. I know exactly what I'm doing. This is the price you pay for your betrayal. Her eyes burned with a mix of frustration and sorrow, but I wasn't moved. The damage had been done. I had moved on, and nothing she said or did could change that. The final chapter of our story was written, and there was no going back.